Hey guys, Happy New Year. I know I'm a little bit late to this video, but I've been in the process of moving. Speaking of, I'm in a temporary studio space. This is going to be my office, but right now it's the only room in my house that's even close to finished. I wanted to thank my team, Ephraim and Mark, for their work today. Without them, I would not have been able to get this video out even as late as it is. So thanks, guys. That's really appreciated. So today I wanted to talk about the biggest news stories of 2021, and I wanted to wrap it up all in a conveniently packaged video format, because that's what we do here on my channel. The first thing I want to talk about is the Steam Deck. What's probably the biggest gaming news of all time happened this year with the announcement of the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is Valve's answer to the Switch, a handheld PC with the built-in buttons that you would expect from something portable like a Game Boy or a Switch. Powered by a custom AMD Zen 2 APU and 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM, the Steam Deck packs quite a punch when it comes to both indie and AAA games on the go. There are 3 different models to choose from, each having exactly the same specifications except for storage. Starting as low as $399 with the base 64GB eMMC model, the popularity of the device was evident the hour pre-orders went live as the Steam store straight up crashed. We know that according to leaks, at least 100,000 units were pre-ordered within the first 2 hours, and this was just for the mid and high tier models. And it should be noted that Valve expects to sell millions of the Steam Deck by 2023. I, for one, am very excited to get my hands on the Steam Deck, as I've covered the device extensively on my channel, and if you can't tell by my coverage, I am incredibly excited for this device. But many big names in the industry, including the head of Xbox, Phil Spencer, have got their hands on development units, and they were all impressed with it. Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic Games, who is Valve's rival in the PC gaming ecosystem, also chimed in and mentioned the potential for the handheld. Unlike many gaming PCs today, the Steam Deck ships with SteamOS 3.0, a custom Linux-based operating system focused on gaming first. SteamOS 3.0 is based on Arch Linux, and Valve mentioned that the reason they chose Arch was for its bleeding-edge software support. Though the Steam Deck does use a custom version of Big Picture mode by default, the user can switch the device over to regular desktop mode, which in this instance is using KDE Plasma. Although the Steam Deck was meant to start shipping back in December, it's no surprise that Valve had to delay the process until February due to chip shortages. But Steam Deck isn't the only Linux gaming news. Anticheat came to Linux in 2021. Anticheat software has long been a problem with Linux. Start a popular game up, such as Apex Legends, and the game immediately crashes upon startup. Since the Steam Deck is powered by Linux, both Epic Games and BattlEye announced support for the Steam Deck and Proton. To enable easy anti-cheat support from Epic Games, a game developer needs to use the latest Epic Services SDK, click a few checkboxes for Proton support, and that's pretty much it. AreWeAnticheatYet.com is an unofficial anti-cheat database that contains a list of games, what anti-cheat software they use, and whether it supports Proton yet. So far, Dead by Daylight, Rust, Knockout City, Due Process, Polygon, and Star Citizen have been confirmed by developers that they will eventually support Proton. 7 Days to Die, Albion Online, Brawlhalla, Squad, and War Thunder are already working. A few months after Epic's announcement, BattlEye followed suit. A game developer who wants to support Proton and the Steam Deck with BattlEye Anti-Cheat needs to reach out to the support team. Ark, Survival Evolved, Arma 3, DayZ, Insurgents, Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord, PlanetSide 2, and Unturned are all working through Proton. No doubt, without Valve's efforts to help the Linux gaming scene, especially with the advent of the Steam Deck, we would probably never see the light of day with these titles. And let's be honest, it probably won't be that long before we see even more titles supported. Now, in 2021, we also saw many distro releases. Canonical, as they traditionally do, released a new version of Ubuntu in April and October, and 2021 was no exception. They released Ubuntu 21.04 and 21.10. A big change with 2104 was the default display server being Wayland. For as long as I can remember, Xorg has been the default display server on Ubuntu and most other distros. But as time went on, Wayland brought improvements, including better performance when using multiple monitors and better high DPI screen scaling. Of course, Wayland still has its set of problems, the most glaring being poor support with NVIDIA graphics cards. But changing back to Xorg is as simple as changing the display protocol from the login screen. Other changes besides the usual software upgrades include a slightly darker theme, the dark shell theme being used by default, a few applications updated from GNOME 40, and minor visual changes. Additionally, home directories are now private by default. Laptops have different power settings they can choose from, and a recovery key is generated when encrypting a disk. 6 months later, Ubuntu 21.10 Impish Idri was released. In the latest version of Ubuntu, the desktop environment was fully upgraded to GNOME 40 while still containing some of Canonical's tweaks. Pulse Audio was upgraded to version 15 with Bluetooth LDAC support. The installer got a UI overhaul and the kernel was upgraded to 5.13. This release saw the initial support for Apple M1 chipsets, as well as more hardware support for future Intel and AMD processors. And of course, software packages were updated, including Thunderbird and LibreOffice. Firefox was now installed as a snap, though this might have caused a bit of controversy since the Linux community at large seems to have a distaste of snaps. I know I do. But that's it for Ubuntu. How about other distro releases? Well, Pop! OS, designed by the team at System 76, also followed the same release schedule as Ubuntu, and they have launched 2104 and 2110 this year. The biggest upgrades to 2104 was the overhaul of the desktop. Instead of vanilla GNOME, it's now using System 76 in-house fork called Cosmic, or Computer Operating System Main Interface Components. The activities overview was divided into two parts, workspaces and applications. Now the workspaces can easily be changed through here. Additionally, an application dock was added to the bottom of the screen. Cosmic also has a new launcher that lets you search your applications, specific menu settings, and recent files. It also lets you run bash commands, perform a search online, or do mathematical calculations. That said, System 76 is reportedly working on their own desktop environment, written entirely in Rust. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this. 2110 was released just a few days ago, and it features a new application library which replaces the launcher from 2104. Some features from GNOME 40 were incorporated into Cosmic, and the kernel was upgraded to 5.15. Now, 5.15 saw a new NTFS file system driver, further M1 support, Alder Lake CPU support, enhancements to ext4, and a new AMD Van Gogh APU audio driver. Along with the release of Pop! OS 2110 came the initial support for the distro on Raspberry Pi, aptly named Pop! Pi, which I'm just reading right now from my teleprompter, and that's hilarious. Up next, Debian 11 Bullseye was released this year. That's right, Debian, the distro that rarely sees a new release hit the light of day, was released in August. That's a whole 2 years after Debian 10 was released. Remember when SteamOS 1 and 2 used Debian? Debian 11 includes 11,294 new packages, 42,821 updated packages, and 9,519 removed packages. For desktop environments, it uses GNOME 3.38, KDE Plasma 5.2, LXDE 11, LXQT.16, Mate 1.24, and XFCE 4.16. Now, Debian 11 also features exFAQ support, improves man-page translations, improves support for alternate init systems, a new generic open command as an alias for XDG open, driverless printing, among many other technical improvements. Debian 11.1 and .2 have been subsequently released, containing bug fixes and important security improvements. Fedora 34 and 35 were released this year. GNOME was upgraded to version 40 in Fedora 34. Wayland was set to the default display protocol for the KDE Plasma edition. The overall security of the OS was improved. Development packages were upgraded. Pipewire is now the default audio server rather than Pulse Audio. Nice. The kernel was upgraded to 5.11, and the BetterFS file system now features transparent data compression. Fedora 35 upgraded to GNOME 41 with a redesigned software store with improved support for Flatpak containers and includes the new 5.14 kernel. Now, there were many other distros released in 2021, but I want to move on to the state of Linux on M1. Asahi Linux is the project responsible for running Linux on Apple's silicon chips. Progress has been good so far, but there's still a lot of work left, namely CPU frequency scaling, CPU deep sleep support, a rewrite of the entire Wi-Fi driver patches, NVMe patches, and GPU acceleration. On the other hand, the project got the keyboard and touchpad working on M1 MacBooks, as well as audio playback via the built-in speakers and headphones. And this is on the standard M1 chips, not the M1 Pro or Max. And kernel 5.17 will see more hardware driver support. Kernel 5.16 already has PCIe and Thunderbolt driver support, and it probably won't be long before M1 is nearly complete for working on Linux. Let's move on to the Software Freedom Conservancy suing Vizio. Now, it's not uncommon for a company with open source software to modify it for their own products and not give attribution to original creators, let alone publish the source code themselves. Vizio, a television manufacturer, is no exception. A few months ago, the Software Freedom Conservancy, or SFC, sued the company, alleging that they breached 2 public licenses in the creation of their SmartCast platform without publishing the source code. The SFC is not asking for money. Rather, they simply asked Vizio to share the code that they used. They mentioned in their complaint that this would benefit the public and further the goals of software freedom, and it would allow developers to keep user data more protected and improve accessibility. Now, so far, Vizio hasn't responded to the complaint, but it's really nice to see that there are organizations out there that take the theft of open source software seriously and do something about it. Now this one's a doozy. Did you hear about the students that intentionally included malicious code in the Linux kernel? As if 135 vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel this year alone wasn't enough, researchers at the University of Minnesota deliberately created and sent malicious kernel patches. Their goal was to see how the Linux kernel project would handle such exploits. Greg Crowe-Hartman, a major kernel developer, banned anyone using the @umn.edu address from sending any commits, and previously submitted commits from that address would be removed. He found these commits to be, quote, submitted in bad faith to try and test the kernel community's ability to review known malicious changes. One of the security researchers at UMN called the accusations wild and bordering on slander, to which Crowe-Hartman responded by telling him to find a different community to run your experiments on. A short while later, UMN apologized for what they did. And finally, probably the coolest bit of Linux news was Linux going to Mars. Have you ever heard of Ingenuity? It's the 4-pound drone helicopter driven by Linux and open source software. The drone is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 801, a quad-core ARM processor running at 2.2 GHz, and uses F-Prime, an open source flight software framework created by none other than NASA, so it's fitting. And the fact that Linux is on the surface of Mars right now is just incredibly cool. So much happened for Linux in 2021, and this year should be even better for our community. I can't wait to see what happens with you. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you leave a like down below. Let's see if we can get to 5,000 likes on this video. That would be great. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button to see all the fun things that we're doing on the show. I want to thank my friends on Patreon and my YouTube members. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this, so thank you. If you believe in the work that I'm doing, consider pledging your support with the links below. That's going to do it for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time.